of the SUNY Wellness Frameworks webinar series. So glad you could join us for this third installment in our 5-part series where we're going to explore national and international frameworks that guide and strengthen health and well-being across SUNY. Today's session focuses on the Healthy Campus Framework, which is a model that emphasizes creating environments and systems that promote wellness through collaboration, data-driven strategies, and holistic support for students, faculty, and staff. Our speakers today will help us reflect on how SUNY campuses can use this framework to foster inclusive, sustainable approaches to campus health and well-being. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers. First, we have Dr. Jaime Castillo from SUNY Geneseo. He is a licensed mental health counselor and is the Director of Counseling Services at SUNY Geneseo. He brings 17 years of experience as a mental health practitioner, supervisor, and educator. Dr. Castillo is a SUNY Hispanic Leadership Fellow and recently launched Well at Geneseo, which is a well-being education for leaders in learning. It is a professional certificate program for faculty and staff at Geneseo to gain knowledge, skills, and support to promote mental health, wellness, and positive changes across campus. Dr. Castillo is an active member of the New York College Health Association, having served as the mental health section chair, and just last week started his term as president. Dr. Castillo earned his doctorate in counseling and counselor education from Syracuse University, his master's in school counseling from the University of Scranton, and his bachelor's in psychology from Penn State University. Our next speaker I'm very pleased to introduce is Rebecca Harrington. Rebecca is the Assistant Director of Student Rights and Responsibilities at SUNY Delhi, where she balances Title IX responsibilities with prevention efforts around sexual violence and substance use. With over 2 decades of experience in student-facing prevention work, she has been a key contributor to SUNY's system-level sexual violence prevention initiatives, earning the SUNY Chancellor's Award for Professional Service in 2018. Rebecca has also contributed to national well-being education projects with the American College Health Association and Carnegie Mellon's Open Learning Initiative. Rebecca is also an active member with the New York State College Health Association, serving as a conference planner for the organization. Recent bucket list checkoffs include a fall 2023 interview on NPR's Morning Edition about fentanyl test strip education and buying an electric banjo. She is the mom of a teenager and is known locally for fronting a local blues band in her spare time, thus allowing her to be well-rounded in sex, drugs, and rock and roll. So please join me in welcoming our speakers today. One final housekeeping thing. Before we begin, today's webinar is being recorded and we'll share the recording and materials after the session. Please feel free to add questions or reflections in the chat throughout the presentation. We'll be monitoring it and have some time for question and answer at the end. And with that, I will turn things over to Jaime and Rebecca.
Thanks. So we have, Jaime and I've spent a lot of time talking about lots of ideas. We're going to see how much of it, comes back out of our brains, but I'm very excited to see so many folks in the room, and there's a nice smattering of different places and spaces on college campuses. So I think for those of you who are near and dear, maybe closer to the nexus of the counseling, health promotion side of things, we can talk through strategies for having those conversations up and out. And if you're from other points, you can kind of get an inside view of some of the thoughts and ideas that are coming from inside those spaces. So we literally have like a 2-slide presentation, pictures, which are good. So I guess, Jaime, do you have anything else you want to say before we get into the small amount of meat we brought?
No, I think I'll echo Rebecca and I always have plenty of brainstorming ideas and things to say. And for those of you that might know us, I think that aligns with that. We hope that we can give everybody the space and the time to reflect and engage. Our whole goal is to provide a couple of slides of some broad topics that can relate to a broad group of individuals here at SUNY, And then our hope is that for the majority of the time, we can engage in a back and forth discussion, talking about what are some things that you feel your campuses are doing well, what are some pain points, what are some growth opportunities to this space. And that's really what we wanted to do, is let's start everybody in the same spot, and then let's have some dialogue about where we can go, where we are, and all of those things, because we want to learn from all of you as much as what we can share here. So that's our goal for the next 50 minutes or so.
Okay. Jamie, if you've got the slides, there we go. So, you know, not the prettiest one. I think all of us have our models that we go to as the ones that drive what we do. This is probably my second most favorite model. I will confess that Prochaska and DiClementi's stages of change is probably the thing I cite the most and provides the most guidance for me. And I think there is some worth in looking at that as institutional and organizational stages of change as well. But socio-ecological model, I think, is a good reminder as somebody who recently changed institutions and thinking through, okay, I'm on the ground now. How am I choosing to move forward with this work that I've been tasked to do in my role? And there's a lot of different versions of this model. This was the one that was the simplest, so I pulled this one from Google. But obviously it goes back to 1979, and it's this kind of bullseye approach of there are things that we can do that impact the individual. There are things that we can do to impact the folks that are nearest an individual. There's the institutional organization level, community, and then those larger things. So starting, and this is just kind of a sample model, but thinking through like those layers that exist. If we want a person to make a change, what are the ways that we're going to do that? We can tell somebody to, we can be direct and be like, you need to park closer to the building, or you need to park further away from the building, or you need to take the stairs. I think there's a really great example from a European train station where they wanted more people to take the stairs, and so they turned them into an electric piano, and now it's more fun. And so by changing the environment, they encourage people to use the stairs. And I think we always need to be problem solving that. If you don't have good support at the top level, as you all know, it's really harder to do the jobs that we need to do at the bottom level. And so I think when we're looking at these levels, we can also apply this to different lenses. Like, yes, we want students to make changes, and so the student becomes our individual. But maybe we want employees to make changes. Like, we're doing an attendance study right now at SUNY Delhi, and hopefully part of that is how do we help identify the things that students say that they don't want to go to the classroom. We're going to have to support our employees to make classrooms probably more engaging to the way students want. So we're going to have to be looking at our employees as the individual and how do we support up and through all the many levels. And as you all know, working in higher ed, there's lots and lots and lots and lots of levels to work at. And sometimes, you could have two really great ones that are functioning really well, and it's the missing one that actually needs the effort. And sometimes it's that silent one. And I think, again, departments could be individuals. I think you could look at our individual SUNY campuses as those individuals. There's what Delhi can do, but we're always looking at you, Alfred, like the SUNY campuses that we most often look to as our parallel playmates in the system, but then going up. And so, here's a really great example where we've got this mental health leadership at system, making sure we've got everything coming back on down through the dominoes. So I come back to this a lot, and I'm not always sure if circles is the best way to depict it, because I think it shows how the layers impact down, but I also see these as cogwheels, because if you've got one cogwheel that's not moving, the whole system locks up. So that's what I wanted to share about that. I'll pass it off to Jamie for the one with more circles.
Yeah. Thanks, Rebecca. Yeah, I use this ecological model as like a baseline framework for how I think about the students that I work with in therapy, but also when I'm thinking about systemic change, because we as humans are just people nested in various systems, and you can only do so much change as one person, because if you're embedded within a system that is missing some key components to allow it to thrive, there's only so much change that one person can do. And as Rebecca mentioned about being part of this larger higher educational system, and being able to have access to certain resources at the system level allows for certain things like this webinar series to help kind of go from the top and go down to help bring change from places to support that kind of sustainable work. So this ecological model is so flexible to apply in different spaces. So what we're here to kind of focus on is mental health and well-being, as we all know, is such a priority in our, not just in our higher education system right now, but within the national, international context, right? Mental health and well-being has gone from being a highly stigmatized private experience to, over the last decade or so, being one where it is embraced, it's advocated for, there's a lot more of resources going into that, and one where individuals are able to feel more comfortable engaging in self-care practices, prioritizing their self-care and well-being, and also talking about the mental health experiences or challenges that they're going through, that their community is going through. So we're in a really exciting time for that, not without its downsides. And this is not the time for me to get on that soapbox, but we are in an opportunity here, as Rebecca mentioned, that we have a tremendous amount of power and influence within our systems, within our institutions, within our departments, to work towards creating a healthy campus environment, a health promoting campus environment where not just one individual can be reap the benefits, but that a whole community can thrive. There's a popular metaphor in our mental health and well-being space, or maybe it's an analogy. I'm still trying to figure out the difference between an analogy and a metaphor, but this is what it is, imagine you're approaching a pond in the middle of the Adirondacks, right? And you see a pond that's thriving, and I bet you can picture that it's you can smell the moss, you can just smell a thriving ecosystem. There's just something about it. You can feel it, you can see the lush greenery, you can see a lot of active wildlife in the area, and you know that that ecosystem is thriving. There's a lot of variables in that system that are working together, that are flexible in order for an ecosystem to be thriving. That's why that ecological model is so important, is because thriving ecosystems need some sort of framework to operate from, but also need to be flexible enough to allow certain variables to come in and introduce new things and allow new ideas and experiences to be had. Now think about a pond that you approach and you notice that the smell is kind of off, things don't seem to be lush and thriving, and you can see in the pond that there are frogs and fish and other wildlife that are floating at the top. They're sick or they're deceased. We wouldn't approach that pond and say there's something wrong with the frogs or the fish, although clearly there is. We would say there's something wrong with this ecosystem that's not allowing these organisms to thrive. We're not going to take one frog out and say what's wrong and diagnose this one thing at a time and try to change the culture that way. We're going to look at what about this ecosystem is imbalanced, that is not allowing these organisms to meet their potential. And that's the analogy that, or metaphor, I don't know, put it in the chat, whatever you think it is. So what the Healthy Campus Framework provides is just one framework of many you can utilize to give you a roadmap, or a campus or a higher education system, a roadmap to assessing where your campus is at, where your needs are, and how you can take an intentional approach to driving towards a thriving, healthy campus. So this is taken from the American College Health Association, which is a large professional association for college health professionals. And we'll talk about that in our next slide. I think we actually have 4 slides, not just the 2. So, but provides this framework, and it's made by these kind of concentric circles here. So the first one is the infrastructure. So the outer ring there that you see, it starts at the top with leadership, and then going clockwise to funding, qualified workforce, cultural competence, and you can read that whole outer ring. These are the basic infrastructures the areas of a campus that are needed to support kind of a healthy campus environment. Each of these things can be assessed. Each of these things work together in order to build a foundation where a campus can have the resources, the staffing, and the practices in order to thrive in a way where all members of the institution can play a part. So that's what the infrastructure is. So your first step is to look at and see, where are our strengths? Where are our gaps? Where are we working towards right now in terms of building this infrastructure to implement a healthy campus framework? The next part, the next kind of circle, which is all those other circles, those are cornerstones. And cornerstones within this model are the core services or supports that ensure access to mental health and health services, campus partnerships, ideas around confidentiality, public safety. So once you have that foundation, right, now we look at the core services to look at and consider, how are we in terms of the actual direct services and units that are part of that first identity of promoting a healthy campus? What are the relationships between medical services and health promotion? Ancillary services and specialty services, those are things that vary campus by campus, such as access to psychiatry, physical therapy, sports medicine, nutrition, dietetics, those sorts of things. So again, it provides an opportunity to say, once we have our infrastructure, the next thing is to look at, what are the core services that we have available to our students or our campus community that allows for a health promoting campus, a healthy campus, to be able to thrive? What are the services that provide either proactive or reactive opportunities for campuses to thrive? That's where our cornerstones are. The next two kind of layers to this are not reflected in this model, but they are community and culture. And community is that part of this ecosystem or this framework where it moves from not just the individual services or practices that any member of a campus community need to engage in, but broadly speaking, ecologically speaking, what are the systemic practices, the policies, all of those practices that happen within higher education, the bureaucracies, all of these things that allow for the infrastructure and the cornerstones to be efficiently applied and also sustainable over time. So as we know, you can implement a one-off health promoting event, but in order to instill long-term sustainable effective change, there needs to be support from that community level. How is it embedded into the practice and the mindset of our campus? And that's where the most broader component of this model, which is the culture, that's where the culture component of the healthy campus framework applies. Meaning, how is your campus's identity as a healthy campus? How is that reflected in the mission, the values, the even broader practices, the priorities, the strategic plan of a campus? Because as we know, for any system to thrive, you need that higher level understanding and support. Then you need the community practices, right? You want your Title IX office to be working collaboratively with your counseling center. You want your counseling center working with your university police. You want your health promotion offices to be working together with Residence Life, to be working in concert with one another as we are developing this thriving campus identity. And that's where it comes from, the culture of the institution, that these sorts of things are encouraged and supported. It also allows for a campus to utilize health promoting guiding documents to align their strategic plans or their institutional priorities with healthy campus ideals, things like the Okanagan Charter, the World Health Organization, the JED Foundation. Have your pick. There are so many incredible healthy campus organizations, associations, guiding documents to give you a pathway to establish this for yourself. And this is just one of those frameworks. So I want everyone to just take a moment and look at all of these areas for yourself. We're going to leave this up for a moment because this is a slide that we want to engage with all of you on with some questions, some reflective opportunities here to engage in a conversation. So you can put it in the chat, or I'm not sure how we would respond to questions, if it's just raising your hand or what have you. But the one question that we want to start off with everybody, and Rebecca and I will kind of tag team this and you know, sit on a question or reflection as long as we feel the group is interested in that. But the first one that we want to kind of put out there are, in looking at this model and in understanding where you are in your campus position with regards to some of these practices and ideas, what are some of the pain points to your campus wellness model, right? And we'll open that up to what are some of the areas that you feel your campus is working towards, that is embracing, and what are some current obstacles to furthering this work on your campus? And that'll be our first question.
And you can feel free all to put your responses in the chat, or if you want to use the hand function, we can go through the order in which folks put their hands up. So whatever works best for you in terms of participating. And also this is a safe space to share and collaborate as well. Well, I can throw something in if that's helpful. I think my background is in communication, and I think sometimes just recognizing that it might be hard for campuses to make sure that, you know, all the information is disseminated to the appropriate parties, and just even that informational piece, I think, is important to, you know, be a part of the conversation.
I think sometimes, you know, you can frame this question around, you know, like if a genie shows up and you get 3 wishes of things to change, you know, I think time and money are always going to be the first 2 wishes. So what's your 3rd wish to, you know, the thing that you've just been like chomping at the bit, like, can we just get this done? Like, what are those obstacles that are just sitting in the way? And sometimes those are people, and sometimes those are relationships, but my guess is that they exist somewhere in one of those 2 circles. We're getting some conversation here in the chat. So the collaboration between departments is vital. And, you know, I'll share a personal story, and I spent a lot of my career at Oneana, and I used to, for my own mental well-being, try to put something on my calendar once a week, coffee with a colleague. And sometimes we get some work done. Sometimes it was just being humans together. And Oneana spent a whole year remote, and I think it was those coffee breaks that I took with my colleagues that made my life work that year, because I could call people up. We already had an established relationship, and we can make things happen, or that they knew the person, because, you know, small campus, your networks broaden out very quickly. So sometimes, you know, it is serving on a committee that you don't necessarily want to serve on that committee with, but it gets you in the room with the people that you need to be in, and starting those relationships.
I saw a question there around data, collaboration, those sorts of things. And it can feel really overwhelming to know even where to start. I remember when I started here at Geneseo a few years ago, campus was doing a lot of great things, doing a lot of things.
but things weren't being done in a coordinated way. A lot of the offices, which is such higher ed, right? A lot of offices working on similar projects or ideas, but separately. You had committees that were working on similar objectives, but didn't know that there was another committee kind of working on the same kind of thing. And it took a lot of time. The analogy that I used was, it was like we had this desk, and under the desk was this rat's nest of cables. And everything was working, everything was plugged in, but you're like, where does this cable even go? How does this even operate? What is the policy around this cable? If I unplug this, does anything actually even turn off? Or is this like a old cable that has been sitting there for 3 other people before me? I have no idea. Does this even use a cable anymore? And it took time to build, to assess, and just get your bearings around what are our priorities at our institution. Let's go back as far as we can until we find some common areas and look to see what are the steps that are needed or what is being redundant, so we can start to kind of untangle a lot of these operations. So it took some time to build so many relationships. And it wasn't until we invested 2 years of inviting offices to different meetings, to really evaluating our committee work about what are our shared responsibilities, to really understand and allow for our campus kind of agenda to kind of move cohesively, right? It takes a long time for a cruise ship to turn around, but that's sometimes the amount of time that it takes. And partnering with some colleagues that institutional data is so important, and again, building time to cultivate those relationships to figure out what sort of data is already regularly collected by the institution. What data is already collected by the institution that is aligned in these areas that we can continue to evaluate and look at. So a lot of this comes down to, first trying to understand and build partnerships where maybe some of those have been ignored or not prioritized, and ask them for coffee, as Rebecca was sharing. But that's one area that I can join in saying that sometimes that's some of the most challenging work that we do is having to take a step back and really assess what our priorities are, and how do we work together to be able to realign.
Yeah, and I'm seeing like the compassion fatigue and the sheer exhaustion. And I was having that mental self-talk as I was driving onto campus yesterday. Is like, I'm paid one human salary and I deliver one human's worth of work. And I have to remind myself that sometimes it is really easy to take on more and more and more. And so, coming in with what are the priorities, and I think none of us want to be in that space of having to triage. We want to do all the things. We are aligned in our person, when you can align kind of your personal mission with your employee mission, like it gets really confusing and messy at times. And so, being able to step back out of like, is it mapping to this? Where's the work need to be done today that helps the longevity stuff? And yes, we're, as I sign off to many a Zoom, like, good luck with putting out your fires today. We live in an exhausted state, and at the core, taking care of the humans that are part of the system are always going to be the best choices. But I think when it comes to delivering messages, like I need to go speak with a division, in my Title IX role, and I was like, if you can just give me 1 minute at a meeting, like that's cool. If you saw it on Law and Order SVU, you need to tell your Title IX coordinator. That's it. Like that's my message. And sometimes it does need to be drilled down to those little ways. But again, opportunities for stumble upon things of, just being in the right place at the right time and being able to engineer those opportunities. And again, being able to come back to this and think like, okay, I know where to get funding. I might not get it, but I know who I need to ask if I need money for something. I know who to ask if the light bulb is burned out in my office, and, just kind of self-check against these places. Do I have an inside person over here? I mean, some of the smaller campuses, you only need one inside person and you can check off 4 of those circles, but, building out, those relationships. Do I have those folks? Do I have regular meeting time with them? Because again, sometimes you can't do the work you know, the work in the, I don't know, horse in the cart, if we're going to be in analogy metaphor land, like you need the relationship before you can do the work
Yeah.
together.
I know part of I see some comments around compassion fatigue, time management, and all of those things. And remember, the healthy campus identity is not just for the students. We cannot do this work if we ourselves are not doing well. So all of these initiatives and all these things also take into account staff and faculty well-being. We're the ones that are doing that work. And if we are not monitoring those things, it's hard to implement the work. But I can completely understand that after a day's work of engaging if you're in a student-facing position and you're like, how do I even move the needle? This is where a framework like this can be really helpful to focus on one thing at a time. If I'm trying to build a house and I have all the materials in front of me and I don't know, do I start with the foundation or the plumbing goes first or the electric goes first? Does the lumber go? What is the order of things? I can't wrap my head around it. If you are in a position where you feel that you're able to contribute to moving your campus towards this direction, looking at this model, for example, and saying, I want to really understand how our campus, what type of marketing and communication does our campus do in terms of informing our campus, general campus population, or our students specifically around what resources and services are available to them? How often are they connected to? How often is information around well-being initiatives or activities are encouraged or promoted to students? How often are faculty sharing events that can promote this sort of work, integrating that into their regular classroom discussions or reminders, right? That feels more manageable than trying to change everything all at once at the same time. So being able to say, I want to create a group of people together to start to look at and evaluate where is our system and our campus at right now. And let's focus on our advocacy. Let's understand, what is our student health insurance coverage like for our campus? What do our students have access to or not on our campus? And then you can check that off and say, all right, we understand this component. What's the next one for us to do? So this kind of model can help to prevent some burnout by allowing you to take a very intentional approach of assessing and understanding and collecting data in really targeted areas, one thing at a time, to really understand where your campus is centered at right now.
See, Allison wants to join the conversation, so.
Oh my gosh, it took me forever to figure out how to raise my hand. Thank you for the people.
It was
that
a
I
team
know.
effort. It was great watching that in the chat.
Oh, first off, I want to thank Jamie and Rebecca, and as always, Julie. You all are rock stars. But I wanted to contribute to the idea of faculty and staff that you all have started to talk about, and the idea of, I think probably everywhere I've been, there's always that lack of supporting the faculty and staff and how they fill their cup. And I think that, employee assistance, whatever it is, and where that is always like the natural place to look. But I think that part of this framework is, policy and what we're doing with faculty and staff is that like working remotely, for work-life balance and the little things that we can do for employees. And one of the things that we did here is that when I got here now a couple years ago, there had been a really heavy time for the whole campus, with a large suicide cluster. And the campus observed some wellness days, but the counseling staff wasn't able to participate. And so their wellness wasn't quite the focus. And so what we did here is the semester I got here is we started a wellness day for the staff. And so every semester, each staff member, the counselors, the support team, whoever it is, they pick a day where they block out their whole schedule for themselves. They stay on campus. They're encouraged to, do whatever fills their cup, whether it's going to a campus event that maybe if they had a back-to-back schedule filled up that they wouldn't necessarily be able to attend. Maybe it's catching up on their work because that's what, helps them feel better and fill their cup. And so we've been doing that ever since, and that's been working really well for us. And so that is something we're doing internally in our department. But I think like thinking like that and creatively and how we're practicing with employees and staff is great modeling for students. I think we're all, you know, doing great for the students, but I think that we could all probably do better for faculty and staff. So along those same lines as Jamie and Rebecca, you were saying, yeah.
I appreciate that, Alison. I like that idea of wellness days. A couple years ago, myself and a few of our staff went to a college counseling center conference in upstate New York, and we were attending a workshop or something on staff retention and well-being and prioritizing all of that. And one of the staff said, you know, we should be take some time during our day to kind of take some guilt-free self-care time, you know, especially in our work as in the counseling center. But that's true for, you know, anybody that's working in this area, because you never know what is going to be asked of you. So we piloted that for a semester, and every staff member in our department in counseling was allowed to have an hour a week called their wellness hour. And it doesn't matter what they use that time for, as long as it is rejuvenating to them. And they block it out on their calendars. And you know, as the director, I was like, oh boy, how much time are we going to be losing here? But let's trust the system and trust the staff that they're going to take the time when they need it. They're going to use it, and encourage staff to use that time to attend a campus event if it's there, to utilize our recreational facilities, to go for a swim, to go to the gym, to grab a cup of coffee, whatever. But something that whatever they identify as rejuvenating, and you know, staff use it sporadically, but I'm always so proud when they use it because they're recognizing that I'm taking this time and is not one that I'm going to feel guilty or shamed for. And nothing has been impacted in terms of our quality or access to services. Staff do not overuse it. They're able to use it responsibly. But I recognize, similar to Alison, like we were able to implement that because we're in a position of, whether we like it or not, power. And if it's something that we buy into as the leaders, that contributes to their well-being, that contributes to increased staff retention, that staff belonging, trust, all these things that we know when it's really tough to hire people into higher education. We need to also be making sure, how are we making sure that we're creating an environment that once we have staff here, that they remain here and that they can thrive in the same way that doing this kind of work and attending to all these areas like in this framework is all to help students thrive. There is some pretty compelling data that's coming out of places like Oswego and UB around the positive effects of student retention when engaged in well-being or health services, counseling services, health services, and access to those students are retained at the campus at a higher rate than students with similar presenting concerns, but have not accessed these sorts of things. So when we're talking about how do we implement this kind of work into our campus, going from a time in higher ed when health promoting services, health services, counseling services, all of those traditional health things were seen as a reaction, intervention, or kind of a side ancillary program. But if we center our campus environment into one that is truly one where we're trying to allow all of our members to thrive, we are beginning to see some longitudinal data that shows that students retain, staff retain when they're able to work in an environment that promotes their overall well-being. But I recognize the tension as a manager of, ooh, is that work though? Is that something that's going to be helpful? And that's a tension that I know I feel, even though I believe in this work, but that's where we are in our identities as leaders. So for those of you that might be in positions where you can have that kind of influence because that your level of your title allows you some flexibility and power to instill a little bit of change, I would encourage you to try a pilot in your unit, to try something that promotes this kind of work and see what happens. Because as Alison shared, you know, you can have some pretty compelling evidence and show how that might be able to be scaled differently to your campus. So I appreciate you sharing that, Alison.
I'm scrolling back through and I saw Allie's comment of not a pain point, but an aspiration, institutional level imagination to examine role differentiation, identify resource gaps, implement strategic hires with strong interdepartmental collaboration with guided frameworks, and this benefits the student and the future patient and the employee. And I have, like we have all of our favorite like biases and fallacies too, probably the confirmation bias. And I invented one, I haven't published it. I call it structural fallacy. And I think higher ed succumbs to it. And it's this idea, if we get the hierarchical structure just right, and everybody has a title that maps exactly to that hierarchy, like suddenly all of our problems are going to get fixed. And we put a lot of energy into things that I think, when you're at the bottom of the hierarchy, you're like, okay, here we go again. I'm going to get a new business card because we've changed some structure, but I'm not seeing how that makes my job, get better, get easier, make more sense. And I think there are those opportunities of like the asking the why. Is this real, like the energy into like making sure that committees are not doing overlapping work, and the analogy of the cables under the desk, because we've all been there of unplug it and see what happens next, because that's more fun. But I think there are those places of like, is my energy actually going in the right direction? And I think sometimes we're short-sighted when we say, well, the mission is to put the student first. But I think if it's also student first to have longevity of staff. And I think sometimes there's the short term, yes, obviously this is going to help students, but we have to invest the time and the energy and the money into those long-term goals.
Yeah, I love the passion and the questions that are coming through. There was a question on the data for the retention work. So this came from conference presentations that were done. UB did this study, and they found statistically significant differences in those students that were engaged in health and counseling appointments versus those students who did not, in terms of their retention and graduation rates. Penn State did a longitudinal study with like 10,000 students over the course of 6 years, where they saw that students who self-reported or on a symptoms questionnaire the same levels or rates of anxiety and depression, and the students who sought out support, counseling services during their time at college, compared to those who demonstrated the same level of symptoms but didn't engage for support in those areas. The students that did demonstrated higher retention and higher graduation rates than the students who didn't, right? And that's the kind of data that, as practitioners, as higher education, when we know that the demographic cliff is here, we know that there's a smaller pool of students that are going to be coming to all of our campuses. So the priority now is not just diversifying the enrollment pool, but also, once a student's on campus, how are we giving them the services that they need to get their basic needs met, to be able to thrive in a way? And we're showing that access and surprise, when your basic health and well-being and safety and security and basic needs are met, when you feel like you're part of a community that wants you to not only feel connected to, but you can thrive, that you want to stay there, that you're able to demonstrate some resiliency when stressors arise. So I'll try to find if those have been published, but they've been presented in public conferences. I'll try to see if I can scrounge together some of the official documents there that we might have access to, or if those have been published yet, to share. But this is how we kind of connect it to the larger administrator language when it comes to how do we have the funding in these things, is being able to show the tremendous impact of student success and retention and staff retention if we are looking at supporting the well-being of our community.
We have a little side chat about data, and something I just want to put out there, like SPSS can be a grasp if you don't have, a solid hold on that and feeling confident. But this is one of the places where I've utilized AI as a professional. AI can help you work your way through a spreadsheet. I'm like, I have this and I want to see if it's predictive of that. And, you don't have to put any of your personal data into the AI, but you can say, I've got, like student ID. I have a student ID column on this this worksheet name on this column and I need to map it to this, and it will give you the formulas that you need without having to disclose any personal data into AI. I'll just talk you through running through those statistical analyses. So you don't have to be an Excel wizard. And, use what you've got.
There's a quote that says, which applies to this, and I want to move us to the next couple of slides to share more information about how people can stay connected to this important work professionally and what have you. But the quote is, "You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems." So I think everybody here, all 88 of you right now, I'm sure aspire to be part of a campus that thrives. If you're a campus leader, I don't think people want to have campuses that are not thriving from any dimension of higher education. But strategic plans and values and missions, all of those are goals, right? And we want to achieve those goals, but we also know that no goal is met unless the process to get there is clear, is realistic, has data, that it makes sense to the resources that you have available, that you have the systems that are there to promote it. So this kind of framework or this work, we all have that similar goal, but we all are part of very different systems. And this kind of framework helps to close that gap, that we can acknowledge the gaps in our systems that are preventing us from reaching our aspirational goals. So that quote always sticks to me about we don't rise to our goals, we fall to our systems. So we've been talking about this framework, ACHA, American College Health Association. That's where Rebecca and I actually met originally, was being part of a New York State affiliate. So if you're not familiar with what the American College Health Association is, it is a national organization that offers both institutional, meaning like a campus can be a campus member, or you can have individual membership. So if you're part of an institution that doesn't have that sort of membership, you could belong to it like any other professional association you might have. And with that, any professional association, you come with a lot of resources and opportunities to connect and network and all of those things. As a SUNY, we are spoiled to, believe it or not, there are areas professionally where as a SUNY employee, we are spoiled. And not many of those, but this is one of those. Where we have connection with each other. We're part of a system that is caring more and more and investing in mental health and well-being. And if you want to continue this work, being able to connect with other colleagues nationally or even regionally is important to kind of be part of that. As we mentioned, we're part of the New York State College Health Association here in New York State, if you're a member of that. And it's another opportunity that if this is work that you're passionate about, this framework that we discussed today there's a lot more resources for assessment, national assessments that you can use to benchmark the data of your institution. That's administrator language to be able to use real data to benchmark your campus of where you need to go and what you want, because that's always the question, right, when it comes to that. So so this is like our organization that we want to also kind of share that can be helpful. Many SUNYs are already members. So this next slide, this is all of the campuses connected to SUNY that are institutional members, meaning if your campus is on this page, you as an employee of that campus can be a member to the New York College Health Association, or ACHA. And all you need to do is email the person listed there. That person is the institutional roster manager, and you can share, hey, I'd like to be part of this community. That's how I first got involved with NYCHA. I was part of another institution that had an institutional membership, and I had no idea that I was part of that. So if this work is important, if you want to prioritize this work for yourself, these are campuses that are already officially kind of connected. And it's a great opportunity to continue this work, but not saying this is the only organization. As we mentioned, the JED Foundation are other great resources as well. But since we're focusing on the ACHA Healthy Campus Framework, we wanted to make sure that individuals who might already be connected to the association were able to access a lot of those resources as well. Rebecca, this is our last slide, so we can utilize the next 5 minutes or so for any other kinds of thoughts, questions, reactions that individuals might have with regards to what we're talking about today.
Sure. And I think, there's a couple of questions in here as well. So institutional membership is certainly a larger cost, although everybody at your institution then therefore has access to membership. Individual memberships also exist, and I'm not sure the exact number. It's, I think, roughly $200 a year. So it might be a more affordable starter price if you're an institution that doesn't have as much money. Is pick one person who's going to be the member, because it doesn't matter, like that'll be the only person you can access in, but they will be able to get on the listservs, but at least your institution now has access in some way, shape, or form to the content that's available. I know I pay for membership out of my pocket because it's my professional org that I feel connected with, even though I'm now more in Title IX. But like when things show up on the listserv, I will share them with my health center director and my counseling center director so that they're apprised of what information's out there. And I can go back and search if they're looking for some kind of resource. Oh, thanks, Shelley, for looking that up. 215 this year.
And
And they
feel free
also
to
have
share any positive things with the group as well, or how this conversation may have inspired you to do great work on your campuses.
I think I stumbled into ACHA as a new employee back in 2004. And, I had jumped ship from being a music teacher, where I was very involved with the Music Educators National Conference that had a very similar national structure. So I knew to go looking for the professional org, but ultimately I found a family, and I've got an amazing network of folks from across the country at this point, from having been involved with it for so long. And, we do host an annual conference every other year that's hosted in New York State. So they just had their conference that was hosted by our New England partner org. So, affordable regional conference that you'll walk away with as much education as you will with networks. And I think that is so important. I'm looking at the names of the folks here, and I know quite a few of you because of those conferences. And yeah, getting old on a college campus lets you meet a lot of people and retain those networks. But, if somebody, posted something in the chat, like go reach out. Like these are important networks, because, sometimes you're solving a problem, and sometimes you just need to know I feel like there's the moment where you're like, we're all collectively banging our heads on the same wall some days. And it's just nice to know you're not alone in that. And, again, it's sustainability of the soul, as a former president that I worked with used, and I like that idea, that concept of we're all in it together, even though we're all doing work in different places and in different ways.
Julie is a great point person as our mental health liaison. Julie is our connection to SUNY system, and so if there's ideas or initiatives that your campus is doing, or questions that you might have, Julie is kind of the center spoke in the wheel of a lot of different mental health and well-being initiatives, and has finger on the pulse of what's coming down at the system level. So it's a great opportunity to stay connected, or to understand if there's other initiatives similar to yours on campus, if there are opportunities for grants or what have you. Julie and her team are really wonderful at making sure that we stay up to date with those opportunities, and also always open to seeing what are some innovative things that campuses are doing to build that SUNY system community towards this. So feel free to flood Julie's mailbox with stuff, and I'm sure she'll love that.
Yes, please please feel free to email me whenever about whatever. I'm always happy to talk through things with folks. But I did see Michelle left a comment about SUNY-wide collective health promoting professionals. Actually just created a listserv for those folks this week. So Michelle, if you want to email me, we can talk through that further, but happy to say we have a shared space now for health promotion staff. Okay, I guess I can close us out here since we're at time. So just wanted to thank Jaime and Rebecca so much for, providing insights and expertise around the Healthy Campus Framework and other areas of well-being and mental health on campus. To today's attendees, this is the third session in our Wellness Framework webinar series. I'm going to drop the link in the chat for the full series. So our next session will be on the Okanagan Charter Model, and for attendees, you'll receive follow-up emails with today's presentation and materials. So hope you continue to join us for the rest of the series, and we really appreciate you attending and showing your continued partnership and commitment to supporting wellness across SUNY. And thank you again to Jaime and Rebecca.